Thank you for being here. I will share some information that's especially relevant for seniors. Understandably, this is the time where you are actually appealing financial aid, so very relevant for you. Of course, anyone else who is not in that timeline right now, then this is information that's important to hold on to if you are younger. This is also still very relevant if there are any college students or parents of college students, because you apply for financial aid every single year. You're going to have to go through this every single year that the child or the student themselves are in college. Awesome. I saw a counselor pop in. I see a senior. Thank you all for being here again. Really appreciate this time. Now, I'm going to disable the chat for now, only because I would love to reserve the Q&A section for all of your questions. It's a little easier for me to monitor the Q&A than the chat, because the chat I'll lose the questions. So a lot easier for me to monitor the Q&A. Please post your questions there. Feel free to do so as we go along the presentation. I'll do my best to get to all of them. If we're not able to get to all the questions, we'll see how many come through. I will for sure download the Q&A questions through Zoom, and I'll make sure to include responses in my follow-up for that. So everyone will get the slides, the copy of the presentation, the Q&A answers, and then of course some additional materials that I'll refer to during this presentation, and just that is helpful for all the parents, students, counselors, and everyone who's joining our time together. So just a very quick disclaimer here. I want to make sure that I want to be clear about sort of the purpose of our conversation really is for educational purposes. We are going to talk about sort of the financial aid process and decisions that families are making. I would revert any questions to specifically, for example, financial planners, financial advisors, tax advisors on some of your specific questions. We are always happy to help. I'll share my contact information as well. I'm more than happy to meet one-on-one with families. This is a perk that we offer at Juno. We meet with families for free to help you navigate through what your options are. But for some specific scenarios, again, there are any kind of financial advice, I refer back to professionals. So let's jump into today's agenda. I wanted to just share briefly a timeline of the financial aid process. We'll spend a good portion of our time talking about merit-based appeals. What are some of the reasons for that? What you may need to include, but also the majority of our time discussing need-based appeals, how that's different, and ways in which you can actually submit valid reasons for successful appeals, reasons that are going to be considered very closely by financial aid officers, and then also some reasons that are not, that should not be included or are not valid reasons to try to appeal. I'm going to share a little bit about Juno just so that you understand how we situate into this process, some of the work that we do, and then leave our time together for a Q&A as well. So as we think about the FAFSA, many seniors on the audience, parents of seniors, this may feel like 1,000 years ago when you've gone through this, as you've been going through this process. The FAFSA opens up on October 1st. That's when it becomes available, and I encourage families always to submit as early as possible. Schools have their own deadlines for the FAFSA. Again, many of you have already gone through this process. You've already received your student aid index. You know that number by now. Or if you're not familiar, you can reacquaint yourself with what exactly that number is. We have an entire presentation devoted to both the FAFSA and the student aid index, or the SAI. Happy to share those resources with any families. Again, many of you have already applied to college, and this is really the pivotal time that we're in right now. You're receiving your financial aid offer. This is the timeline, March and April, when these decisions come out. Some schools will release with the admission decision. Some may release a little bit after, as you may well know from the decisions you've been receiving. Now, this really is the time to consider appealing your financial aid award. Now, why is that important? We always want to maximize grants and scholarships as much as possible. So the less you have to take out in loans, the better across the board. Whether it's scholarships from the institution, which is first and foremost, that's the first stop. If you can get more resources, more funding from the school, that's excellent. Then you can consider external scholarships from there, and then potentially think about other alternatives after you decide which school you'll attend, thinking about the opportunities if you need to take out loans, how to apply for those, what your options are before the final tuition due date is due. Now, I mentioned this, we have a lot of resources available on our website on on joinjuno.com/webinars. All of our content is free. I mentioned this earlier. If for those who joined a little bit late, this recording is going to be sent out to all attendees. You'll have access to the slide deck. I'll share that as well. We post our information for free always on our website, on YouTube as well. You can find our past recordings. We'll focus specifically today on the financial aid appeal process. Many high school families are in this right now. And so what do you need to know before you may need to think about other ways to pay for college? So let's assume that you have already received your letter. Again, some college decisions are still pending, but what do you do after you've received that letter? Think about this as the first draft in the process rather than the final product. Now, financial officers are there to support students in every way that they can. And I want to make sure that this is a really clear understanding because it might shift the way that you approach the conversation, and I hope it does in a positive manner. Financial officers really want to give families as much aid as possible. But as you think about it, there are thousands of students applying to each universities, and that may be accepted. And so how can the aid office equitably allocate the resources they have available at their disposal to do their best across all the families, right? So that is an important consideration where I encourage every family to appeal for financial aid if you have a reason to. And then from there, you also have to think about the many other families, hundreds of families, maybe thousands of families that are also appealing their financial aid offers in hopes of receiving more. Now, if schools had unlimited aid budgets, absolutely they would do what they could to make sure they meet all of your need. That's not the financial reality, though, at many institutions across the country. And so they have to be as intentional as possible to give resources to the students that either need it the most based on a need-based process or have a compelling reason, a merit-based appeal, a merit-based process, a very compelling reason that the student, that school wants that student on their campus. And so again, financial officers are on your side. They want to do as much as possible to support families to get you to come to their university. But keep in mind that they have there are restrictions or they have constraints within which they're able to operate. Now, if you really, really want to go somewhere, I'm speaking to the students in the audience, and the cost is just a little bit out of reach, it never hurts to ask for more aid. Now, a school won't rescind your offer of admission just because you ask for additional funding. So don't be shy. This may be uncomfortable for you because you are going through this the first time in your life. This is a daily process for financial officers. So it's not out of the ordinary. It's a completely expected part of the process. And so where it may be a little uncomfortable for you, it's the professional responsibility and the obligation of the financial office to process appeals day in and day out. They tend to meet as a committee either once a week or twice a week to discuss all the appeals that have come in. So know that it is a very common practice. It's not weird, it's not unusual whatsoever to appeal your financial aid offer. Now, there are two different types of appeals, a merit-based appeal and a need-based appeal. Merit-based appeals are qualities about the student, characteristics, attributes, accomplishments that warrant additional financial aid. So maybe a student is the top debater in their state. They're very accomplished in that field. So that may be a reason why a student is very attractive to the university and they really want to bring you to their campus. So they may give you additional merit scholarships in order to pull you towards that institution. Now, many other types of merit-based aids, it could be an award for athletic ability, for musical talent, many reasons. It could be high GPA, high test scores, a really strong academic student, great research a student might be doing. So as you can imagine, many reasons why a student can get a merit scholarship. On the need-based process, where we'll focus the appeals process here is focusing on a family's financial situation and circumstances and how that can contribute to additional financial aid opportunities. Now, know that it is not one or the other. These are not mutually exclusive. You can submit both a need-based appeal and a merit-based appeal. And in some cases, it may be very appropriate to do so. So whatever the situation is for your family circumstances, both of these may apply, not just one. As we think about merit appeals, I wanted to share a couple of tips in asking for more aid. First of all, be selective in who you ask. Now, you want to communicate that the school is among your top options. You don't want to reach out to every single school and go through this process with multiple institutions unless you're seriously considering them. If a school is eighth on your list and you've been admitted to eight and it's the bottom on your list, then if you realistically will not attend over the other schools you have been admitted to, then don't waste your time and don't waste the financial officer's time submitting an appeal. The process again is really important where you're communicating both, and this is especially true on the merit side. You're communicating your enthusiasm for this school. You're communicating your willingness to attend if the school is able to make it work financially. So if they're able to offer you an extra $5,000, that's really, really going to help. Then that is an important part where, again, you want to operate in good faith in this process so that if a school is able to meet your requests, then they have the confidence knowing that you'll end up enrolling in their institution. It does help if you have received more than one offer of admission and especially scholarship offer, a merit scholarship offer. This way, you can go to the institution that you might really want to attend and say, hey, I love this institution. I would really be happy here for XYZ reasons. This other school is making it a little bit more affordable for me. Is there any way you can match this financial aid offer, this scholarship offer? Is there any way that you can come close to it? So you can leverage one acceptance in order to support your appeal, your merit-based appeal for another institution. Again, you've already been admitted to these institutions. You don't have to be shy. They already love you. They won't change their minds on the admissions decision just because you ask for more help. As we think about some negotiation strategies, a couple key points that you should all keep in mind. To emphasize again, express your enthusiasm. Merit scholarships will oftentimes be reviewed by the admissions committee. It can be a combination of admissions and financial aid, or sometimes depending on the school, it could also be just financial aid, but it tends to be the admissions office. So these are your advocates. These are the folks who went to bat for you in the committee conversation and really wanted you at their institutions. And so your continued engagement and enthusiasm with the school is important. And so this is a conversation where you're working with the school in order to make this dream a reality. You want to be specific about why that school makes sense. Maybe they have a particular robotics program that is exactly what you want and exactly what makes sense for your future career paths. Maybe there's a professor who is doing research on some marine life or marine species that is really interesting to the student, really exciting, and maybe a student has done some kind of research like that already at the high school level, and this is a perfect fit, right? All the reasons that you may have communicated in your admissions application, why a school is a great fit, you want to emphasize that, and again, continue to express that type of excitement. With any kind of additional offers that you have, frame it as in a way that expresses excitement for the school, but also needing a little bit additional support in order to make that dream a reality. You don't want to come out with a really intense tone, and this will lead into the third point here, to say, well, this school gave me much more aid. Like, what's going on here? So again, you want it to be a collaborative conversation. You want to work with the colleagues in admissions and financial aid to make this a possibility. If you are abrasive, that's not going to work out. They're not going to want you to even come at their school anymore. They may not, I mean, it could depend on how egregious the behavior is. If you're particularly rude, then that's a whole other conversation. I don't expect that to be the case for anyone in the audience here. But if you are completely abrasive and obnoxious and rude, that would warrant a reconsideration. I know I sort of just said earlier that they won't, but if you are highlighting poor judgment, poor aspects of how you might engage in a community, if you're verbally abusive to staff, there's no tolerance for that. Again, I don't expect that to happen to anyone here. you just want to express that caveat, but also be honest in this process. If you communicate that you have another competing offer, you're going to be expected to showcase that offer. So don't exaggerate, don't lie, don't misrepresent through this process because that will also not reflect well on you as you're going through the appeals process. Now, when should you do this? You want to submit your appeals after you receive multiple offers, but before you submit your enrollment deposit. So the common reply date is May 1st. Most institutions will ask you to submit your enrollment deposit by May 1st. So you need to go through this process before that point. But also, what I've been hearing is, speaking with families even today, they're still waiting on a couple more decisions to come out. And it's okay to wait. So if you're still weighing out your options, wait for everything to come out so you have all the cards on the table. You can understand what the net cost of each school is. And then from there, make that good faith effort for your top two, your top three schools, maybe to say, I'm really excited about this option. It's a little bit financially out of reach. Is there any way that we can make this work? You want to reach out to your financial officer or admissions officer. Again, it can vary depending on the school. You can call the school to identify who the best point of contact is. And then it is possible, best case scenario, that you get approved and that you have an increase in your scholarship amount, which is amazing. That's free money from the institution that you then don't have to pay back. That is the best case scenario, and we love when that happens. Now, there may also be a counteroffer, and perhaps the school is not able to get to that ask that you had. Maybe it's $8,000, but they can offer you half that. Is that sufficient to make it doable for your family? The school is doing what they can to get as close to what another school might be offering. Now, it is possible that an appeal can also be denied. And so if that's the case, just know that it does happen. It is an option. But if they are not able to reconsider your offer again, if nothing has changed in your circumstances, for example, then ask if there's an opportunity to be considered for aid in future years. It never hurts to ask. So if you are not asking, then most other students are. And so if you're not in the running for those scholarship dollars, then you won't receive them. Now, as we focus on the need-based appeals process, this may be familiar to many of you if you've attended our webinars in the past, or if you just know about the well-versed in the FAFSA process. With need-based aid and the FAFSA specifically, the FAFSA asks for income information that is outdated. So it uses what's called prior year data, which is income data from 2 years ago. So for the fall of 2026 start date, it uses 2024 tax information. That may not be reflective of where family positions are now. For some families, it may be reflective, and if your income has stayed stable over the course of the last few years, then your aid package will pretty much stay the same unless there's been some significant changes. So that's not always the case though for many families because income from 2 years ago may be wildly different than where the family is now. If you remember from how need is calculated, it's the difference between the cost of attendance, the big sticker price that you see on college websites. So that's cost of tuition, fees, health insurance, room and board, or housing and meals. All costs that a school considers as potential cost to the family should be included in this number. Now, from there, you subtract the student aid index or the SAI. I'm not going to talk in detail about the SAI. We have several presentations on our website about it already, but that number in this example, let's say it's 1,500. So the difference between the cost of attendance and the student aid index is the demonstrated financial need. The lower your SAI, the higher your need is going to be. And so from there, the student aid index captures information from income, both student and parent, both assets, again, the family side and the student side, and family size. Family size also plays a big factor because there's a certain level of income that's protected based on family size. All that goes into the FAFSA, and then the student aid index gets calculated. So with the income piece, again, it is outdated. It's from 2 years ago. And so if your situation has changed, you absolutely should appeal. If there's been a job loss, if there's been a change in income, particularly a decrease in income, if there's been an increase in income, that's great. We're happy to see that. Just know that in 2 years' time, when that change will be reflected on your FAFSA application, and so you may expect to receive less financial aid if your income has dramatically increased. Now, the family assets are considered at time of the submission of the FAFSA and your financial documents. But there are things that are not included or that are not asked about. And so there's nowhere to include them on your financial application. And so examples of this might include high medical expenses. This can drain your savings account. And so if you reported your asset value, and then at that time, when you let's say you applied, submitted it back in January or December even, things can change. The value of your assets may have changed over the last 3 months. And so that's important to note on your appeal. And then similarly, for family size, as I was describing, the FAFSA asks if there are multiple children in the home that are in college, but it doesn't actually adjust the student aid index as a result. If there are multiple children in college, then it's imperative that a family does appeal with that note to indicate that there's more than one child in a university, and the parent is responsible for payment across both of those. Now, in the next couple slides, I want to go through some of the reasons why you might want to appeal. I'm looking at a couple questions here. Let's see, I'll pause here for a moment. Okay, great. Great question here from Brandy. So your admissions counselor actually encouraged you to reach out to her instead of the financial office. That is completely appropriate. Again, it can depend on how each institution handles it, both on the merit side and the need-based side. Almost all need-based appeals, I can say with fair confidence, are handled by the financial office because that's where they have to redo your financial aid offer. But in the case of merit, it could warrant a direct conversation with the admissions counselor, as you highlight here. Absolutely. And that's great that she would want to go to bat on your behalf, advocate for you in the committee room for that extra scholarship money. That's excellent to hear, and that's a good sign. Good question. So here, that you received an offer, but it says it's non-negotiable. So is there a way to approach it? Are there more merit awards available that are not included? So this can vary by school. Some schools may not be willing to consider merit-based appeals. All schools have to consider need-based appeals. So if there has been a change in your family circumstance, then that's where a need-based appeal is warranted, and a financial office has to factor that in. They have to, if warranted and if appropriately documented, they have to factor that in. On the merit side, again, it can vary school by school in terms of how much a school is willing to offer to a student. It's worth still appealing. You never know. If we get closer to the common reply date of May 1st, and a school is maybe not on track with their yield numbers, they may be willing to reconsider. Again, it can depend on the school. It is possible. So if they may not reconsider aid on the merit basis, then they're doing their best to allocate all the funds in the first round, in the first go. But it's still worth trying and seeing what they say. At the end of the day, the worst response you can get is a no, and you're back at square one where you would have been anyways. Here's a really important question. If you've already told the school that you've chosen them, can you still use other school offers in your merit-based appeal? Now, there's still a difference between if you've submitted your enrollment deposit versus if you just verbally communicated. Now, you can still submit an enrollment deposit and not end up going to that school if another school has given you a more generous offer. So submitting your enrollment deposit secures your place in the class. Now, again, the consequence of not enrolling in that university anymore is that you will more than likely lose what's a non-refundable enrollment deposit. Now, that might make sense if you've received, an extra five to $10,000 at another school. Um, Again, it could depend on what the enrollment deposit was. Some schools have started increasing them to deter families from not enrolling or to make it more consequential if you don't enroll. So you'll have to weigh out sort of the analysis of how much aid you receive versus the cost of breaking uh, your submitted enrollment deposit. It is still worth reaching out to the university nonetheless, even if that is the case for you, and another school has offered a more generous award. That's even more reason to say, I'm already excited about this school. I would love to attend, but unfortunately, this other school has come with a better offer. Is there any way you could match that? Again, you do lose a little bit of negotiating leverage, which is why I recommend all families wait before submitting that deposit. Again, completely understand you may have been super excited or your child may have been super excited on the admission decision that worked favorably. And immediately that night you submitted, yes, I'm going to this school. Case closed, I'm done. But again, as we think about the realities of paying for college and what that means, then that's where we need to take a step back, slow down, and really be deliberate about comparing all of the options on the table. So it's not impossible. It does weaken your position, unfortunately, but it's still worth submitting an appeal, especially if you have a competing offer. Yeah, here's another great question that I'll answer, and then I think after this, I'll let's come back to some of the reasons you can appeal. Should the appeal come from the student or the parent? Excellent question. Is there a difference for merit and need-based appeals? Should the student parent both write, combine it together? Excellent point here. So it can depend on the nature the of the letter and what's communicated and the reason for the appeal. Merit-based appeals should come from the student. Again, these oftentimes go to the admissions office, not always, but most times they go to the admissions office, and a student should be communicating their additional accomplishments. Maybe they've won awards at their school. Maybe they've had success in any extracurriculars that are worth mentioning. And so the merit-based appeal really should be coming from the student. The need-based appeal can vary either from the student or the family or both. Now, again, it could warrant the reason for the appeal could warrant who the audience is written from. Of course, it's always safer to be from the student, but there may be some circumstances in which the student is maybe not aware of or doesn't know as much information. So for example, I'll point to a couple of the examples that we have listed on this slide. Uh, if there's been any kind of reduction in child support, I'm not sure if if your children are going to be aware of that or not. Depends on how much the parent may communicate with the child about that. So there are circumstances in which students may have no understanding of what's going on behind the scenes, or they may have very little insight onto the situation that the family is going through. So in those kind of instances, it's appropriate for the parent to write that letter. More common reasons why families will appeal will be a reduction in income, which again is generally communicated with the student or if a parent has lost their job, right? That's more common family knowledge. So it's not unusual for that kind of detail to come from the student to say, my parent has been unemployed since November of 2025, and it's been 5, 6, going 7 months, whatever the term is. And this is a financial hardship on our family, right? In that instance, it might make sense for it to come from the student. But the ultimate takeaway that I want you to have is make sure that you are communicating all the appropriate information, regardless of who it's coming from, whether it's the student or parent, all the appropriate information with appropriate documentation. So you might show any kind of changes in child support documentation or correspondences. You might share any one-time change in income for a particular year. So let's say 2024, maybe a parent received an inheritance. And so in that case, that income is not indicative of 2025 and 2026, right? If maybe you sold a second property that you owned. that information is going to be assumed from 2024. It's going to be assumed that that is your income moving forward, but it's not the case if this was a one-time event. Again, similarly, if there's a job loss or income reduction, maybe a family member had to decrease their salary or how much they make per hour as a result of difficult working conditions, right? The market may be slower. So make sure you document those with pay stubs, with unemployment statements, benefit statements, a termination letter. Make sure you provide the evidence to show financial officers that this really did happen, and here's the proof for it. Now, there may be unexpected medical expenses, particularly anything that you have to pay out of pocket that's not covered by insurance. Make sure you document that. Save the medical bills. Save any statements and payments that you've made. Anything that is insurance will not cover that is required. Keep those on hand and put them together into a document and save it as a PDF so it's all one document. Make it easy for financial officers to go through all of your materials. If there's any ongoing medical treatment for chronic conditions, maybe it could be consistent therapy that's required, any kind of required medication for a health condition, equipment expenses, whatever it might be. This is particularly with chronic conditions. Uh, this is going to be ongoing, month in, month out, month in and month out. And so ensure that you document that, any recurring expenses, any past expenses, because as we think about this again, whatever resources you have at your disposal, anything within a savings account, for example, may have gotten drained as a result of some of these situations that are happening. Could be caring for an elderly family member or a sick family member, and you had to use a significant portion of your savings for bills, treatment, right, medication, any of the examples that I shared earlier. And so from there, then your family financial position is not as strong as it was before as a result of this. And so from there, that's going to reflect on your student aid index number because you have fewer resources at your disposal. And then any particularly high fixed expenses that you have, debt repayments, even student loan payments that the parents may still have can be considered. Now, finally, other family circumstances that might warrant additional aid. If another parent or if a parent or a sibling is also enrolled in college, you want to make sure to note that and bring that to the attention of financial officers. The new FAFSA, after the FAFSA Simplification Act, doesn't calculate multiple family members in college anymore. And so you want to make sure you bring this to the attention so that aid officers can make adjustments accordingly. If there has been a change in family size for whatever reason, whether there's a new family member born into the family, whether a family is taking in elderly parents who no longer can take care of themselves, and they are now dependents within the family unit. You want to make sure that this is updated, and so the family size can be taken into account because more of a family's income will be protected from being calculated into the final student aid index number. Now, sort of a little bit on a more somber note as well, if there's been a death in the family, or in the case of divorce or separation, this can have important consequences in the aid calculation process. In the case of divorce or separation, if this was after submitting the FAFSA, it's really important to bring this to the attention because for FAFSA specifically, not for CSS profile, but for FAFSA specifically, and I saw a question come in about the difference of FAFSA and CSS profile. So this is a huge one. In the case of the FAFSA, if a parent is divorced or separated, then only one parent is then going to be asked for your information. And so it will be the parent who has provided more than 50% of the financial support for the child. Typically, it's within the last 12 months. If there's been a divorce or separation more recently, it will have been since the separation or since the divorce. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's the parent that the student lives with. It's the parent that is providing more than 50% of the financial support. Okay, So now as we think about uh, how the appeal process works, you want to initiate the appeal by contacting the financial aid office. As we mentioned, they are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And so from here, financial officers have what's called professional judgment. They have the authority to adjust cost of attendance um, so that your student aid index number may be different than the one that you initially received. From there, the financial officer will notify the student of any adjustments that have been made. And so the family can then receive a new financial aid offer. There may be some opportunities for additional review if a family is denied, but this can vary institution by institution. Now, you want to draft a formal appeal letter in order to submit to the university. You want to state the reason for your appeal, any special circumstances, change of situations that were not in the original financial aid application. So that is a really important point. If you submit exactly the same information as before, admission officers will have already seen your information, and so then they may wonder what's different from the first analysis. If it's nothing, then they will deny your financial aid appeal. So there has to be some new information that you provide. Gather all the documentation, as I mentioned, that is critical. Financial aid officers need documentation in order to begin to consider any appeals. An appeal without documentation will be denied. Now, as I mentioned, schools are required to review your appeal letter, and this is on a need-based basis. Again, on the merit side, it's a little bit different, but certainly if there's a need for additional resources based on changes in family circumstances, from there, that has to be considered. There's no guarantee, but again, the worst that you can hear is a no. Now, equally important as to what to include for valid reasons to appeal, a couple points here that I wanted to make on changes in your family circumstances and situation that won't count as valid reasons. If there's been a change or reduction in retirement income, could be a 401k, a 403b, then that will not serve as a valid reason to appeal. Similarly, if there's been a reduction in any investments that you hold, whether it's property, whether it's equities or cryptocurrency, whatever it might be, that is an inherent risk that you take by choosing to invest in those things. And so if the stock market declines, then that is not a valid reason to submit an appeal. If a parent refuses to contribute to the student's education, unfortunately, this is not going to count. This will not be a valid reason to appeal from the college's standpoint. Colleges expect both biological parents to contribute to a child's education. And if there's an unwillingness from one parent or a refusal from one parent to participate in the process, that is not sufficient in the eyes of colleges and universities. Now, I want to make one important distinction here. If there has been any abuse at home from a parent, or it is unsafe for the other parent or the child to be in communication or in contact with an abusive parent, then that is a completely different scenario. That parent will be excused. They will be waived, and the financial office will not pursue the abusive parent's contact information or financial information. So just know that that's really important. But otherwise, just a simple refusal will not be valid, because if that was the case, then every family would have, whether it was true or not, every family would have one parent who refuses to contribute. If a parent is unable or unwilling to borrow the Parent Plus loans, that's also not a reason. So Parent Plus, we'll talk about this in a moment, is getting capped at $20,000 per year. So if a parent is not willing to borrow on behalf of the child, whether it's federal or private loans, that's also not a valid reason for additional grant funding. And then similarly to this, on this last point, a lack of credit-worthy signers is not going to be reason for a college to give you more scholarship money, just because a parent or any credit potential co-signer on a loan is not eligible. So what's really important to know is that you are not in this alone. I wanted to share just a really helpful tool. It's a free tool that we created, launched just a few weeks ago, and it's completely free to use. So it's our financial aid appeal generator tool. It works for all grade levels, incoming first-year students, sophomores, juniors, seniors in college. You can start by identifying yourself, whether you're starting or you're already enrolled in college, and then you choose which type of appeal that you want to submit, right? We talked about the merit appeal process, the need-based appeal process, if there are multiple children in college. We didn't talk about dependency overrides. I won't get too much into that, but I talk about dependency overrides in our FAFSA webinar if you want to look at that for reference. So just it will understand what your situation is. Specifically for merit appeals, you want to include information about the different offers you've received, the schools, the total cost, right? That total cost of attendance, any scholarship money you received, and ultimately what your net cost is. So in the column that you see here on the right, you pay, that is your net cost. And this is the number that you want to focus on when you do submit appeals. Not necessarily how much grant money did you receive from a school, but what is the amount that you're expected to pay? So for example, let's say Duke offered in this case, I'll just make up this scenario. Let's say in this case, Duke offered $30,000 instead of $60,000 in grants. The net cost here would then be $60,000. So Ohio State would end up being cheaper because you'd pay $12,000 less than Duke. So you want to focus on that net cost to you as a family. Now, another point I want to mention here is that it is most helpful to submit appeals based on similar type of schools or peer institutions, as the universities call them. And so, for example, if you want to appeal at Ohio State, then maybe you also apply to Michigan State, Penn State. You want to use those offers because the difference between public and private is more substantial in terms of how aid is allocated. And for Duke, then you might want to consider um, uh, appealing Duke with Vanderbilt and Occidental College, right? Another private institution out in California, and Yale. I'll throw Yale in there because I used to work in the admissions office at Yale. So you want to compare similar types of schools, and as a result, that will be most effective in understanding for colleges to be able to compare what their peers are doing and how they might be able to offer you a financial aid award based on how similar or different it was from other schools. If a peer school is offered a much more generous package, it's more likely for the institution to then try to match it. Again, not always the case because there are some that say, like we talked about earlier, we don't do matching or this is the final, it's not negotiable. So there may be those cases, but it's still worth trying to ask, especially if you have a competing offer from another peer institution. For need-based appeals, again, you want to select the reason for your appeal, share a little bit more information and context, and then the tool will actually create and craft an appeal letter on your behalf that you can send out to the financial office. Especially important is that it will recommend the suggested attachment. So what do you need in order to include for a successful appeal? All the evidence that you want to provide. This is going to significantly reduce the amount of back and forth that you have to have with financial aid officers to say, oh, well, you forgot to include your termination letter. So can you please do that so we can actually review your financial aid appeal letter? Right, the less back and forth, the more time safe, the better it is all around for both you and for the financial office, because you'll hear back on a sooner timeline. Again, it's a totally free tool. If you take nothing else from what we talked about today, I would just ask that you please check this tool out. And you can use it for multiple institutions that you've applied to. It's just meant to make your life a lot easier. It's meant to utilize the language and the terminology that financial officers generally expect to see, and then make it easy ultimately for you to know which documents you might need to collect. Now, just a final couple notes here before I'll turn my attention to Q&A. I'll share here, you may have heard about these changes that are happening, and if not, I want to make sure everyone here is familiar. The federal government has instituted a reduced borrowing limit on the Parent Plus loan program. And so the Parent Plus is for undergraduate families and the amount that parents could borrow for their children's education. Let me speak for a moment to the current college students and parents of current college students. If this is you, then there are no changes in the requirements. So if a family, I should say, if a family has borrowed a direct loan in the past, so it could be that federal direct loan of 5,500 in a student's freshman year of college. If you've borrowed direct loan in the past, then you will be granted a legacy exception or oftentimes grandfathered into the old terms of the loan. So on the bottom right here, you'll see the current policy, which is where we are today. These changes go in effect July 1, but for any college student, you can currently borrow under the current policy, which is up to the cost of attendance and no lifetime limit. Now, let me turn my attention to high school seniors and parents of high school seniors and anyone younger, because the new policy is going to start July 1, and this is the only borrowing capacity you'll have through the Parent Plus program. It's $20,000 per year annual limit with a lifetime limit of $65,000. Now, this lifetime limit is per student, as well as the annual limit. The annual and lifetime limit is per student. It's not per parent. So it's not the case that parent one and parent two can both borrow $65,000 for a combined $130,000. It's $65,000 per student. So that is the total borrowing limit that you have through the federal Parent Plus program. Now, some families may be forced into the private loan market as a result. If your school costs more than, or if your financial gap is more than $20,000 per year, you'll be forced into the private loan market. If you need to borrow lifetime more than $65,000, then you'll be forced into the private loan market. So this is where we've tried to step in, sort of as Juno. What we are is a collective bargaining group to negotiate for better student loans, lower rates, better terms. We've been doing this since 2018. I was actually started by two Harvard Business School students asking the simple question of loans are expensive. Is there any way we can get a discount by coming together as a group? And so that exactly happened. There were about 700 students that first year from business schools around the country who got together and they negotiated a lower rate, a better rate through a lender than they would have going to the banks individually. I'm a direct beneficiary of this. I mentioned a little bit about, I didn't quite introduce myself in the beginning. I spent the last decade of my career in education. I worked in the admissions office at Williams College, Yale University, and then I was a college counselor at Phillips Academy Andover, which is a private boarding school in Massachusetts. So having spent the last decade of my career in education, in and out of the college process, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, both from an access perspective, because a lot of college is very expensive now and a lot of families are not going to be able to afford it anymore. It's already hard, but especially if you're seeing really high interest rate loans, it's going to be a really tough justification to borrow at very high interest rates. And I mentioned I'm also a direct beneficiary of this process. I'm a Juno user myself. I'm currently in grad school in an MBA program myself, and I heard about Juno because I'm taking my loans through Juno first and foremost. And so that actually doing that process saved me, and this is not reflective of all cases, but for me personally, I was able to get a 1.5% interest rate, lower interest rate than some of the federal options. And so it's worth considering what the overall options might be for a family. And this is where we ask for your help in this collective bargaining. And so the work that we do is basically bring families together from around the country across programs, both undergrad, graduate students, and we negotiate as a collective. And when we come together as 15,000 strong, we are able to get better rates and terms as a result of that because lenders are willing to trade margin for volume. It's a win-win situation all around because all these banks, all these lenders, they spend so much money on marketing to try to, get you to to win your business. But basically what we do is when we have a large group that we have as we had last year and we will have this year, we can save lenders a lot on marketing costs, and then they're able to pass those savings on to us, which we then pass on to the families. And so it's meant to be a win-win situation all around. Now, we are in our group building phase right now. So before April 30th, we're trying to get as many families to join as possible. Now, this does not obligate you to take out a loan whatsoever. Even if you don't know or even if you don't think you'll take out a loan, or if you know you won't take out a loan, it's still helpful because the more families we have, so let's say this year we have 25,000 families instead of 15,000 last year, then we're going to be able um, to have more negotiating power with many lenders, the larger our group size is. So Juno is completely free. I just want to mention a couple of things. There's no cost to sign up. We will never ask you to pay for anything. We don't there's nowhere to put your credit card information on our website. Everything we do is completely free for families. The appeal generator tool that I had earlier, completely free. There's no credit check when you sign up. Uh, you don't have to take out a loan at all if you join the Juno group. It's really an option that we hope becomes available to you should you need to borrow. That's really all it is. What you're doing is signing up effectively for a mailing list. We do ask a couple quick questions. It's less than 5 minutes. A few pieces of information like if the student knows their major, what college they're going to, their credit score, if they may not have one, which is very common, cosigner credit score. So very quick form to fill out. And then from there, that's what we use in the negotiation with lenders. But again, it's completely free. There's no obligation whatsoever. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to meet with you for any kind of support that you need through this process. I can share my contact information. I'll send everyone who signed up an email tomorrow with the recording, with the slide deck. You'll be able to contact our team. I'm more than happy to meet one-on-one with anyone who has specific questions about paying for college, what your options are. So wanted to highlight that again. This is our only ask. Juno is completely free. We will never ask for your money. The only thing that we will ask is during this time, if you are able to join the group, that just serves as a collective benefit to everybody. And here's a link to sign up. Now, let's turn our attention to Q&A. We had a lot that came through, so let's see where we left off. Oh, here's a great question that we get quite often. Thank you for asking this. For merit-based appeal, should I ask for a specific dollar amount or just more in general? Of course, you don't want to lowball. You never know what an aid office is able and willing to give you. You absolutely can ask for a specific amount. Again, what's most helpful is to have a competing offer that has a difference in net cost that you can showcase to the office, the financial office, and see how close they're able, if they can match it or how close they can get to that. Now, I would generally say, again, you may hear different responses on this point, but I would generally say anything about like $10,000 and less is somewhat realistic. If you go to a school and ask for $20,000, $30,000, they've already looked at again, unless it's a need-based appeal and you maybe included completely incorrect information. But from a merit side, realistically, I just don't see that happening, right? To ask for that much of a difference. It is doable, right? More realistic, anything like 10,000 and below. But again, you may hear different responses from other folks. Just it has to be something that the financial office can feasibly do, right? They are resource constrained to an extent. They're trying to juggle offers from and requests from many different students who are also admitted. This is a great question. Tuition expenses for siblings in schools other than college, like high school for special needs. Yes, so this would be a unique circumstance to your family that is not captured anywhere else. And so make sure you document that. Um, if there are, I was talking to a family, it was about 2 weeks ago now, where they actually had to um, file a lawsuit against the school because the child was not getting appropriate accommodations. And so, unfortunately, that it had to end up going um, intensely. So, they collected their documentation even from lawyer fees, from the school expenses themselves that were required for their child with special needs. So absolutely make sure you document it. That is a really important reason to include in the appeal process. Okay, I'm seeing a comment here from an admissions officer. Thank you so much for being here. And emphasizing, I don't know if everyone can see the questions or not. I think you can, but how important tone is absolutely. Um, recommending the desire, if you can't see the questions, I'll just read this out, that many families come demanding more money or insulted that you can't offer more, um, or more audacious reasons, say, the 2,000 extra you gave me after the appeal is not enough. Always recommend that students highlight their desire to join a specific campus, what they've done to earn another consideration, and know that if a school can't offer more, it doesn't mean that they don't want you. As a public school, we can't just adjust packages due to state level funding, but are the perfect fit for so many students. It will also always help to ask for alternatives, like transferring, or if it's possible to qualify for residency later. This is such an important point. There are some universities in some states that will allow you to claim residency status after a year. Not always the case, but that's why it's important to look state by state and school by school. Um, timing is important. Asking for more in August isn't going to work. Absolutely. That is very late process. That's basically when school is starting. Also be aware of schools that do offer 1-year scholarships to rope you in. Please think long-term, about 4 to 6 year investment. I could not agree more. Again, I used to work as an admission officer myself. If you don't mind sending, because it's posted anonymously, if you don't mind sending me an email, I'd love to connect just to for a couple other questions. But I can't stress this enough. That's why I wanted to read this for the entire audience here. I think it was worth the time, because tone is everything. Again, admissions officers, financial officers are doing everything within their power to maximize funding based on what's available. And so please be mindful of that. They are your partners. I'm speaking to the parents now. They are your partners, parents and students. They're your partners in this process, not your adversaries. And so, uh, tone, to echo this comment here, tone absolutely is everything. What's the best way to do an appeal if there are two siblings in college, even if it's the same school? Great point here. I'd recommend you could actually just start with the appeal generator tool. Again, it can serve as a template, or it's sufficient enough where you can actually just submit the appeal letter. But if you want to make any changes to it, you're more than welcome to. So two siblings in college, even if it is at the same school, you do have to appeal for each child separately, even if they're twins, for example, at different schools, or even if it's siblings at the same school. You always have to apply for financial aid for each student separately, appeal for each student separately. Oh, the comment right after that was actually about twins. So sort of to the point that I just mentioned, your process will be your financial aid process will be obviously similar in information, but distinct in where there's a student who's asking this question, distinct in that any kind of appeals have to be specifically for you, regardless of which school is being considered. Again, even if it is the same school and you and your twin sibling are plan to go to the same school or want to appeal at the same school, you have to approach that process as two individuals. Of course, you can probably submit very similar letters from a need-based standpoint, but a merit-based standpoint, you'd want to highlight all of your own individual contributions, the things that make your application different, and any awards that you've received. Good. So if a parent, this is a really important question, because it's a concern for many in the economy here. So if a parent is set to lose their job involuntarily in a couple of months, have already been notified, can you still use this as a reason to appeal? So the reason to appeal would be when it happens, less so of it can depend. If it is a couple months, then obviously I'm assuming that you're starting to look for new jobs, and you may get something before, even before your involuntary departure. So if that is the case, right now would not be the best time to appeal because it's not happened yet. But if you can do anything within your power to secure any kind of employment, again, I know that's easier said than done, but the time for that, with the consideration of that appeal, would be when the involuntary loss of job actually happens. Is getting an employee discount for a dependent or something to use as leverage. This is a little bit of a different circumstance. I don't see that as necessarily a valid reason because that is a particular benefit that is unique to employees. That is not contingent on merit in the way that if a student didn't have this employee or if a parent didn't have this employee benefit, that would be more of a similar apples to apples comparison. This is not the same situation. So I don't foresee this being as a reason a school suddenly give a significantly higher merit financial aid offer as a result of this. Now, there are some institutions, for example, that will do um, um, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's sort of if you're employed at one university and you get discounted at that university, then you can also get similar discounts at other universities that are a part of this tuition discount network. I can like visualize it, but I'm blanking on the exact name of it. I'm sure you might know the parent who's asking this question, but you can use it at you can use that employee discount at other institutions that are part of this network, but I would not see that as being a reason a non-participating member of that tuition discount program would use this to adjust their merit scholarship. I mean, you don't have to contact the head of financial aid to appeal. It could be anyone within the financial aid office. Sometimes at some schools, they will actually designate a specific financial officer for you. And so that might be the person who signs your financial aid letter. Many times it is signed by the dean of financial aid or the head of financial aid. But there are instances in which a specific financial officer is assigned to you, or if not, then anyone within the office can help. It does not have to be the head of financial aid. And oftentimes it's not because they are responsible for many, many other things within the office, but it could be the case that it's them or somebody else. All right. Let's see. I'm going to keep going through this Q&A for a little bit longer. I did want to say, everyone, you're welcome to stick around. If you do have to head out, I really appreciate your time joining us. I'm going to continue seeing how many of these questions I can get through. Again, but if anyone does need to drop off, completely understand. Thank you so much for joining. Can you contact me after tonight with assistance? Absolutely. Please let me know. I'll point you to the appeal generator tool first and foremost, just to play around with it, see what comes of it. It is very helpful. But I'm always available for any specific questions you may have after. Uh, if you did not receive an offer of acceptance, can you appeal the offer of acceptance? Generally, no. Um, I worked at two different institutions, and admissions officers were not able to be reconsidered. Do unplanned medical expenses count as a reason to appeal? Absolutely. Please make sure you include any kind of unplanned additional expenses. The other thing that I'll add as well to sort of unplanned expenses is it could be other things like you have maybe like not to sound dramatic, but maybe a tree fell on your roof and there's a gaping hole that insurance is partially covering and maybe it doesn't fully cover. So you have some pretty significant out-of-pocket expenses. Now, that type of expense you actually should note as well, because that was outside of your control. What I want to also emphasize though is what won't count. So if you suddenly just decide to do a home renovation and you want to upgrade your living room, that is not going to be a sufficient justification of any out-of-pocket expenses that you're paying. So I hope that's a fairly clear distinction between those scenarios. Does it help to have another child at the same school? So it can help from an admission standpoint in terms of yield. So all colleges want to yield these students, which means basically they want, the students that they admit to enroll in the institution. So from that vantage point, it can help. It doesn't necessarily help from it doesn't help from a need-based appeal process, but it certainly can help in terms of the story that the student shares in how passionate they are about the school, their sincere desire to attend, all the great things that they heard from a sibling, about XYZ professor and this type of community, and right. So in a way, it more so serves as a vehicle to share a common understanding of the university, which that is the main point, that is the highlight, not just the mere fact that another child is at that institution as well. The tool is free to use. So see if I'll just paste the link again in the chat. Okay, so I just pasted the link again in the chat. Everyone is welcome to use it. The link will also be accessible through the slide deck presentation. So you'll be able to actually click on it as well. Okay, so here's a question. What is better, a Parent Plus loan or an outside loan that a parent co-signs, so a private loan? Now, this is the central question that is going to be important for each family to identify. A Parent Plus loan is set at a fixed rate of 8.94% this year. It also has a 4.228% origination fee. So it's a fairly expensive loan to take out on top of just the origination fee itself, which is the cost of the cost just to take out the loan is about a little over 4%. So if you need to borrow $100, you actually need to borrow $104 because of the origination fee. Now, that may be or may not be a good option for a parent. Depends on your own circumstances, depends on your own credit score, your own income, your income history, your debt to income ratio, and a few other factors. Now, other loans, private loans can be cheaper for some families. And so some families don't even go the Parent Plus route because they qualify for cheaper rates through the private loan market. And if that's the case, great. Many parents want to optimize for lower interest rates because college is expensive. So the lower your interest rate, the less interest you have to pay over time. So it really is family dependent. I can't answer that. There's no wholesale answer that applies categorically to everybody. This is an individual question for individual families. And this is where if you have questions about it, I'm more than happy to chat with you about that in a little bit more detail. Can you take both Parent Plus loans and private loans? Yes, absolutely. So in the case, again, some families may be forced into this without wanting to, but if you've maximized the $20,000 limit, then and you still need more, you'll have to enter the private loan market. As I just mentioned, you can go entirely the private loan market and bypass Parent Plus entirely if the rate is not what you would see in the private market. Now, even if you go Parent Plus loan only, again, remember the aggregate limit is $65,000. So it's 20,000, 20,000, 20,000 for 3 years. In the last year, you're only eligible for $5,000. So at that point, you're 15,000 short of where you were before on top of any other gaps that you might have. So you absolutely can take both, and it's important to be mindful about what rates you might qualify for in private loans. You can compare that to the fixed Parent Plus loan rate. Okay, so there's one child is a senior and there's an older sibling already in college. Is it a good idea for the older sibling to appeal for financial aid? Yes, absolutely. So this is for both children. One is going to be a freshman in college, and one is already going to be also enrolled in college. You should appeal for both children, one for the incoming freshman and one for the one who's already in college. Appeal at both of those universities. So here's a question about sort of the loan process. When the loan is bargained, who is negotiating the loan? Do students pay Juno or the lender directly? If you qualify for federal loan forgiveness, is the loan considered refinanced to Juno or not eligible? So first I'll just say, like, no one ever pays Juno for anything. Juno is free for families never pay school counselors, partnerships that the many partnerships we have with schools around the country. Um, Juno is free for all families publicly facing. So with that, we we don't collect your financial like the specifics of your financial situation. So for example, when you submit an application, it's through Juno's sort of through Juno's page, but we then direct you to the lender directly. So all of your private sensitive financial information, your social security number, it lives with the lender, not with Juno. And so we serve almost as just the intermediary to negotiate on behalf of the entire collective. And then from there, uh, then giving families access to those deals that you wouldn't have, for example, even if you went to the lender directly. So one of our negotiated deals is a rate match, for example, and many lenders don't participate in a rate match. So there's there's particular benefits of coming through Juno. We have a cashback bonus as well. Um, And so that's how we make it an attractive offer for many families. But your loan will be through uh, a bank or through the lender that we partner with. Again, for any kind of federal loan forgiveness options, that will have to be private loans don't qualify for federal loan forgiveness. And so it will have to be a federal loan. Do we recommend meeting admissions or financial in person or send an email or both? Start with an email because I understand there will be admitted student programming events all throughout April. So you absolutely can attend those and show up in person. It's most helpful though in advance to submit your appeal to the financial office because they will accept your documentation in person, but won't really be able to do anything with it at that point. They can certainly walk you through what the possible outcomes are. Again, if you're missing any kind of information, but outside of that, they're not going to adjust your aid package on the spot because you showed up in person. This is going to be a conversation. There's going to be a committee deliberation about it. All the evidence will be presented, and then that's when any adjustments, if any, will be made. Through Juno is the loan through the student with parent co-signer. Yeah, so again, we are not the lender directly, right? We connect you with the lender that we've negotiated the lowest terms with. And then the student is the primary borrower and the parent is the co-signer. It doesn't have to be a parent, it could be a grandparent, an uncle or aunt, it could be a neighbor who's just willing to co-sign on the loan, somebody with good credit. Yes, so that the student is the primary borrower, and then any credit-worthy cosigner is going to be required. Okay, so you don't see the link for the loan pool. Can you repost it? Yeah, it'll be in the presentation here. Let me post it here as well. All right, I just posted it in the chat as well. But yeah, thank you, because that's just, again, joining the group, it it really helps us for bringing families together and getting the best rates for the collective group. Can schools reduce aid packages after reconsideration? They can. It doesn't really happen, right? If there was some kind of mistake that was found, then yes, they can, but it's very rare that that happens. Juno is not just for grad students, Juno is for undergrad as well. So we support undergraduate students, graduate students, and anyone who also needs to refinance their loans. So this could be relevant for any counselors. I know we have counselors in the audience. If you went to grad school and you're still paying off your loans, any parents in the audience. But it is not just it's for graduate students, undergraduate students, and students who have already who already graduated and may need to refinance. It is at least worth considering because one thing I'll mention, I think in the next couple of days, I remember exactly the timeline. This is just information. You don't have to act on it. but there are some particularly good refinance options right now. It fluctuates kind of month by month, but right now, if it is relevant to anyone, there's some particularly good refinance rates. I'm happy to connect you with our refinance team. Okay, so this is a really important question. Medically advised to retire from full-time work. So you will voluntarily leave your job rather than an involuntary loss of job. So obviously that's going to impact how much you can pay. Would the school consider this? Yes. Typically, so I answer yes. Typically, a voluntary leave will not count or will not be considered. Now, if this is medically advised, then that is a different scenario. And it's going to be really important that you have that documentation. Without that, it's likely that your appeal will be denied. Make sure you have documentation from your doctor, whomever else, any other specialist that you may have had to see, so that it is very, very clear that this is important in your overall health journey and that this is not something that you've just chosen to do as a result. I'm not gonna. There's a question about FAFSA and CSS. I spoke a little bit about the differences. I won't go too much in depth, but I'll follow up in the Q&A. Uh, okay, so mentioned this earlier. I'm sorry to hear you've already accepted your financial offer, paid the enrollment fee, like we were talking about earlier. You can still try, right? Unfortunately, you lose a lot of your negotiating leverage as a result. But if you have a competing offer, that's really what's going to be what helps here. Or if there's been if you have to submit a need-based appeal, the merit-based appeal is going to be a little harder at this point, because again, unless you have a competing offer, they're not likely to admissions officers, financial officers know that you're coming anyways, or you risk losing your enrollment deposit. Now, if a school is more generous, that's great news. You can then come back to the financial office the university that you accepted the offer to, and try to negotiate then. They may or may not be able to do something, but at least at that point, you know. Now, if you chose to attend that other institution that offered a better package, you would lose, unfortunately, the enrollment deposit. All right. I understand. I'm going to try to actually get through the rest of these questions so that we've completely gone through all of the Q&A here. Um, understand the new 65,000 limit, but if it's a 5-year degree, is that reason to ask for more aid between merit and the max loan? We can't cover 5 years. No, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that even if it's a 5-year program, you're capped at the annual limit. Now, one thing that I will add here is this. I wonder, I wonder if this is a joint, like undergrad grad degree. I've seen that happen where your 5th year might be a master's, and maybe you're doing a little bit of grad school courses in senior year of college. That is an interesting situation, and I would ask that you email me. Can you email me about this? Because I'm actually not sure. There are different borrowing limits for graduate school versus undergrad. So yeah, email me and because I don't know how it'd be considered if it's a joint program. This is a great question here. Please send me an email. This is one. This is one that I also get. Is it better to send similar to a question we got before? But is it better to send an email appeal letter through email or request an in-person virtual meeting to talk about appeals? Another variation of this is better to send via email or mail. Email is always better. It's quicker. You include all of your documentation, and that has to get attached to any appeal request. So even if you were to meet in person or virtual and you share, you screen share or you bring your documents in person, aid officers would have to scan the materials, copy them so that they can document it and put it into your financial aid folder. There are also schools that may have a portal that you can upload the materials to. And in that case, that's also just the easiest way so that nothing gets lost in email. It goes directly into the portal and gets attached to your the student record. Yeah. Thank you. So someone pointed out, I was trying to think of it, the tuition remission programs or tuition exchange programs. Absolutely. If a parent overborrows on Parent Plus, can they transfer the extra money to the next year? Um, so a couple, I don't know, I'm thinking up a couple different meanings to this question. One is you can't overborrow the limit. So I don't think this is where you're going with it, but I'll just speak to this for a moment. You can't borrow more than 20,000 for the next year if you're a high school, if you're an incoming college freshman or the parent of an incoming college freshman. So you can't overborrow in that regard. Now, I think what this question means is, let's say you borrow Parent Plus, but you don't need the 20,000, you only need the six, like, let's say 15,000. In that case, a school will only certify the amount that you need to borrow, not the excess. So if you only need to borrow, the maximum that you can borrow is 15,000 because that is your total financial need, then a school will not, they will not accept more than the 15,000. So that would be the amount of your loan that you would borrow. It would be capped at that 15,000. I think that's where your question was going. If that was unclear, feel free to send me an email if I wasn't understanding that correctly. Yeah, so in terms of dealing with schools with CSS instead of FAFSA, a little bit different process because CSS is much more detailed. Um, there are there are still valid reasons to appeal on the CSS, some of which we've talked about, and you can refer back to the presentation here. Um, but with that, a lot of the information is included, and so with the CSS, you're still able to submit appeal, and it could depend on the reason why. I want to be mindful of time here, so feel free to send me an email with any kind of specific questions you have about the differences between the two. Let's see, we have a couple more questions in here. When do you find out? Oh, great. Yeah, it's a great question here. So when do you find out about the winners of this scholarship? We will work together as a team, and I will check in exactly when we'll announce it. And then for those parents, we will email you. For the registrants, we will email you directly. Yeah, we'll figure out if we announce it to everybody or if we just announce it to the winners. But we'll get that going quickly this week. So I would say by this week, by the end of this week. Great question there. Okay, so can you speak more about what parents should state in an appeal if you have two kids in university? We have both a 23-year-old and 18-year-old attending universities for the first time. One quick question here, I don't know if you want to paste let me skip this one for now. I don't know if you want to just paste a quick clarification that I have. Is the 23-year-old an undergraduate or a graduate student? If you don't mind, I don't know if I hope Harlan is still in the Zoom here. If you don't mind just pasting a quick clarification and I'll come back to that question. Yeah, so similar, another question about the differences between FAFSA and CSS. Why might FAFSA be more generous than CSS profiles? The CSS profile is much more comprehensive. In many cases, it does use home equity, whereas for FAFSA, for example, the value of your primary residence is not factored in at all in the consideration. So there are instances in which a family might see, for FAFSA only schools, they might see um, more financial aid. Other factors as well, for example, if a school is only a FAFSA school and they don't take the CSS profile, there's about 200 universities that take the CSS profile. But if it's only FAFSA and the parent, only one parent's information is requested or required, I should say, in a FAFSA in the case of separation or divorce. In the case of separation or divorce on the CSS profile, both parents are still expected to contribute, both the custodial and the non-custodial parent. Now, I mentioned again, in cases of abuse, the non-custodial parent information will not be pursued, but other than that, both parent information will be expected and required. If your student has participated in a very expensive sport, can these be leveraged for additional merit-based need? Unfortunately, no. I would not see a scenario in which a school would consider this um, as reason for them to increase their merit scholarship. Now, I don't. If a student has an athletic scholarship, right, and hopefully, the amount that you've spent on that sport contributed to any kind of merit scholarship in that regard, that typically it's handled through the coaching staff and the admissions office and financial aid office. But outside of that, those costs that you've had to incur aren't going to be valid reasons, unfortunately. You appeal based on student Social Security benefits ending upon high school graduation if you've been depending on them to meet your budget. It could be considered a reduction in income, and so from that perspective, you could appeal. Again, any of the reasons that we also highlighted for appeal, the degree to which they will be considered vary by institution, and the extent that a university can actually offer additional aid as a result. Some schools may still they'll review it, but their funding sources just don't allow them to allocate additional need-based aid or grant-based aid. So again, this is a reason to appeal, and it can be at the discretion of the university in how much they will be able to consider it for additional grant funding. Okay, thanks for the clarification. I'll come back to the initial question. 2 students in college for the first time this upcoming year. So yeah, so I'll point actually, just to make it easy, I'll point to the appeal generator tool because this is one of the 4 scenarios for need-based appeal, and that will serve as a really good starting point for you to draft an appeal letter with 2 children, multiple children in college. In your case, it's 2 children in college. The tool, someone asked about the tool to enter different offers. It's joinjuno.com/appeal. I posted that in the chat for everybody to see. So you can click on that link. It'll also be in the follow-up email that I share. If for Parent Plus loans, if a parent borrows less than 20,000 one year, can they 20,000 one year? Can they borrow next year 20,000 plus whatever they did not borrow last year? Unfortunately, no. You would be able to borrow that during senior year when that limit, when if you do 20, 20, 20, then you have 5,000 remaining. If you do 20, 16, 15, 20, then you'd be able to borrow 10,000 in senior year. So you still cannot exceed the maximum of 20,000 per year, but the aggregate limit you will not have met during the first 3 years, which is okay. You also don't have to borrow 20,000 maximum 20,000 per year. I just highlight that because if you want to maximize the Parent Plus, then you can do it that way. But if you wanted to borrow an even amount, for example, over the course of 4 years, you could borrow $16,250 each year over the course of 4 years, and that's how you would maximize the $65,000 aggregate limit over 4 years. Okay. And final question that I see. Thank you all for sticking around. I still see a lot of folks in the audience here. how many competing offers should I include in my appeal letter? So far, I have two colleges of similar tuition offering more aid than my top choice. I'm a senior and all these colleges are private. Great question. You can include both, actually. The more, I won't say the more the merrier, but um, one is sufficient, right, to get the point across. The the purpose here again is I would stick to just one for this reason. It gets the point across where there is a better offer out there. You don't need to harp on the fact that this your top choice school gave you the worst of maybe your top three choices. So again, this is where the tone is going to be really important, where you don't want to inherently um, or inadvertently communicate that, your top choice school is offering a very poor financial aid package relative to some others. And so that one is generally sufficient. Two is fine to include. I would just, again, caution about the tone that you take. And I don't expect you to have been rude or anything like that, but just be a little extra mindful to say, you know, I'm really considering this is my top choice school. You know, in my top three, there are two offers that I have received that are more financially feasible for my family. Now, this school has always, the school that you're appealing to, XYZ University has always been my top choice. It'd be my dream to attend. I would really love to see myself as a student there. Is there any way to make this work such that the aid offer that I received is more similar or more in line with these two other offers that I have received? I think that is appropriate. The reason I initially was a little bit cautious is because you always want to maintain an appropriate tone through this conversation and not say similar to what the admission officer who was in our on the Zoom said, tone is everything. You don't want to come across as demanding, and so just be especially mindful of that. All right. Awesome. We made it. Thank you all. We still have a lot of folks who stuck around. Thank you so much to everyone who was here. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me. I'd be more than happy to connect you if you have specific questions. If you do have a few minutes just to take out to join the Juno membership group, again, it's completely free. We never ask for your money or anything like that. It's a way to help the collective group to best get those group discounts, those collective bargaining deals that we're able to only get through strength in numbers. Really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for sticking around and have an excellent evening, everybody. Bye-bye.